The International Monetary Fund has cut its 2026 growth outlook because of the war in Iran. Even the best-case scenario, with the crisis resolved by mid-year, means we lose 0.2 percentage points in global growth. The worst-case scenario, a longer war, ongoing supply disruptions, and oil consistently over $100 a barrel, could see us in a global recession by 2027. This news comes as the IMF and World Bank are holding their spring meetings in Washington, D.C. Let's speak now to Petya Koeva-Brooks, Deputy Director of the IMF's Research Department. Petya, thank you so much for your time. I mean, the sad reality is that this war has single-handedly altered the course of what looked like a promising period of global growth, hasn't it?
Indeed, we were ready to upgrade our forecast from 3.3 back in January to 3.4 this year, and then the war broke out, and it certainly cast a shadow on the outlook. And again, this is not just the impact of the supply shock, the negative supply shock, but other channels include potentially higher inflation expectations, as well as something that we haven't seen yet, which is a major repricing of risk in financial markets.
If we focus in on Europe, where are the key vulnerabilities?
Well, we do see a very uneven impact of the war across countries, but for Europe, I think the impact of the energy shock itself, which would increase inflation, is essentially going to erode real income and result in lower domestic spending, is the primary vulnerability. And of course, the inflation outlook is also significantly changed by this. Now, we're expecting this to be temporary, but again, depending on the magnitude and the length of the shock, there are certainly much worse scenarios than our reference case.
Yeah, it's really difficult to predict so much of it, but we are already seeing governments using things like fuel subsidies, tax breaks to just try and help people. What is the IMF's best advice on how nations should manage this crisis?
Well, there are two aspects of it, and again, this is assuming that we are in this reference case where we do see the negative impact on output and inflation being higher. We think that central banks, monetary authorities, at least in the large blocks, can afford to wait and watch for a little while in order to kind of see the impact of the shock, as long as inflation expectations remain anchored. But then, of course, they should stand ready and to act if there is any sign of expectations being destabilized. And then when it comes to governments, the fiscal authorities, the fiscal buffers that countries are entering this crisis are certainly much thinner than before. So to the extent that support is provided, it should really be targeted and temporary, not least because such measures are extremely costly and they're also very hard to remove.
Yeah, sort of temporary and very targeted. I was going to ask what countries should avoid and whether there are any lessons that we can draw from what COVID did to various economies around the world.
Well, I think one lesson is, again, when support is provided, that not to be completely across the board generalized, because, again, in the face of a negative supply shock, what that could do is really not help with the fight against inflation. And I think that is something that we've learned from previous such episodes.
Yeah, and also the role of central banks in making sure that inflation doesn't get out of control if more money is pushed towards consumers to help them cope, for example.
Exactly. So I think one aspect, and we've seen this in the past years, is that having independent central banks that are really empowered and ready to act if needed is a critical part of the resilience in the global economy that we have seen up to now. So that is certainly going to be an important aspect going forward as well.
How important is regional unity at a time like this?
Well, we are seeing a more fragmented world than years ago, but at the same time, what we've also observed is that countries have been agile. They've been forming new trade partnerships and such, and supply chains have been adjusting. So I think we see that as an encouraging sign, and some of that can be done at the regional level, but again, even going beyond that, kind of plurilateral agreements could certainly play a role going forward as well.
Thank you so much for your time. That is Petya Koeva-Brooks, Deputy Director of the IMF's Research Department.